so fancy, it's not going to loop. What's going on, guys? Welcome to Taxation is Theft, the show that talks about all the ways the government is ripping you off and what you can do to stop them. Normally broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube from an underground bunker deep within the jungles of Mexico, but tonight I'm actually on my roof watching bugs fly above my head while swinging from a hammock. It's an outdoor special, so you can hear crickets. I'm Dan, Taxationist Theft Berman, former candidate for president of the United States, currently in the race for governor of Texas. And tonight I have a very awesome guest, Mr. Joe McHugh, and he is an interesting guy. He knows a lot about the world of finances, and so, of course, we're going to take this opportunity to talk about all kinds of things like GameStop, market manipulation, all these things. Should be really awesome. And of course, he also knows a lot about everything from energy and organization and everything else. So we actually have a lot to talk about. It's going to be a really awesome show. Before we get started, if you're watching the live stream, make sure to share and like and post your comments and questions and topics even, because tonight's kind of loosey-goosey. We're going all over the place. And also, tonight's episode is brought to you by Nugg of Knowledge. Head over to nuggofknowledge.com and get your nugs on. There's some awesome CBD hemp products over there. Some great stuff. Also, Delta 8 vape cartridges, which is basically legal THC vape, but not. It's awesome stuff. Go check it out. Go try it. And now, perfect timing.
What's up, buddy? How you doing, man?
Perfect timing. You're like, this asshole's going to keep talking for like an hour. I can go get a drink of water.
Yeah, well, it's all good. You're an outstanding host and a good friend, and I'm excited to be back on here with you to chat with your crew. You want to say hello to my dog? Let me show you my dog. Happy, say hello. Happy. There she is. Her name is Happy. She's a golden doodle. She's extremely loving. And
Are you happy?
She's a good girl. She always wants to be pet, don't you? Yes, you do. So, can you see me all right, or is the lighting a little dim?
Yeah, no, you look great.
So that,
you look better than me tonight, because this is my lighting up here.
Dude, I'd rather be where you're at in Mexico.
It's kind of like a ring light if you think about it.
It's pretty sweet. Yeah, I dig your setup down there. I'd love to be in Mexico.
Yeah. So we had a long conversation yesterday about all kinds of topics, and we were like, man, we should have been recording that.
Yeah.
For the show. Heather's asking me to say my name again, or your name again.
Sure. Sorry.
This is Joe McHugh. I'm Dan, Taxationist Theft Berman. I don't know who she's referring to. Maybe she just wants to hear me say taxation is theft. Maybe she didn't catch your name. So let's see. So we had, we talked about a lot of things, and I think you were able to really explain the whole GameStop thing with some really great details. So let's start there. That's an exciting thing. I've been following that. It's going back up to like 300 again. Because
I know it's pretty entertaining, actually. I laugh, and the best part about that is the Reddit thread where people are talking and actively sharing what they would say in court if they were ever asked why they bought the stock. Because, of course, CNBC and everybody all over the airwaves is talking about how, it's potential market manipulation by retail investors who happen to work together as a team to buy a stock that they like. And so it's funny because the actual line is, I don't know, I just like the stock. And it's just brilliant. I love it. And, when I first read that, I went for a run right after that, and I was just laughing to myself, while I'm on this 3 to 5 mile run or whatever, just laughing the whole time. Like, I just like the stock because it's absolutely brilliant the way that they did that. They're basically saying I'm a retard or I'm an ape, and I just like the stock.
So wait, let me get this straight. Is it a crime to buy a stock just to buy a stock with the intent to make the price go up?
It's not supposed to be, but when everything in America is subjective, there really is no concrete rule about what is and what is not a crime anymore.
So people could actually be prosecuted for manipulating the market for buying the stock.
Well, the SEC defines market manipulation in a way in which buying a stock would not qualify as market manipulation. What happened with GameStop, unless they want to work within the gray areas of the law and say that because they work together as a team to buy the stock, then they potentially can make the argument that that's market manipulation. But if they did that, then they would also have to accuse all of the hedge funds and all of the institutional ownership. It's no different than what anyone else does all the time.
But at the same time, it's one of those things where, like, they don't really have to, because how many times has the Supreme Court said, well, the government doesn't have a duty to do anything? So they could say, well, yeah, these guys are all committing crimes, but we don't have the resources. We're just going to go after a few guys on Reddit.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And the thing is that there's no insider trading. There's no insider knowledge, other than what the public information on GameStop was that it was heavily shorted, probably around $10 by these hedge funds and private equity guys, and they're trying to drive it out of existence. And people said, well, I like the stock. I like the company. I want to buy it. And no, I'm not going to sit down and deal with it. I'm not going to let you run this company out. I mean, I love it. I think it's brilliant. I just love the big FU nature of it, and just giving it to the state. And I'm, if you know anything about, and I know you do, Dan, but if any of the people watching at home know anything about my past, then they know why I feel that way. The FT state. But the thing is about GameStop, as much as I love what the intent of it was with the retail investors teaming up to drive the stock up so that the hedge funds potentially would be saddled with the loss, it didn't work, and most likely will not work for that purpose. And the reason why is because these hedge funds are, the big hedge fund is, I think it was part of a sub fund of Citadel or Fortress Investments. And so when that one hedge fund took a massive loss, I mean, massive loss. $10, if you own 1 million shares at $10, it's $10 million. But if it runs up to 400, and all of a sudden you have a $390 million, liability on margin. And the fact of the matter is that they probably had billions of dollars in shorts, meaning that they had hundreds of billions of dollars in potential losses in terms of margin calls. But the thing is, when the Federal Reserve owns everything, they're able to, one of the ways that they make money is by seeding all of the investment funds, the private equity. These guys are making money for the Federal Reserve shareholders. It's all tied together. And so when this company hedge fund had suffered losses and had to do a margin call, pretty sure, I can't remember off the top of my head if it was Citadel or Fortress, but one of the two came to the rescue, offered them money, didn't really tell the market what the money was for. But I can tell you, if I'm running a hedge fund and I'm caught in a short position like that, what I would do is I would go to my master fund and say, hey, look, these guys are driving up the stock. I could close my accounts and we could be out of business. I could close the trade and we'd be out of business. Or you can give me a loan and I can cover the margin call and I can put on a new short at this higher level. And when you put on the new short at the higher level, let's say around $400, 478, I think is what it got up to at one point. If they put on a short up there and then they ran it all the way back down to $75, I think at one point before it started rallying again, they would have made 75% on their money on a potentially bigger short position than it did the first time around. So as much as I absolutely love what the retail market and the Reddit feed, Wall Street Bets guys are doing, it's not gonna work. It's just not gonna work.
So
I'd rather just see everybody, try to make every American a millionaire and coordinate our actions on the objective on institutionally owned stocks and just buy stocks and make money.
So like, let's say, well, there's a couple of things I want to ask about. So basically you're saying, okay, you're borrowing the stock to short it. When you borrow that stock, you still have to pay like interest or something on it, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
So are they basically just going to wait it out until the price comes back down and just pay interest on it?
Well, think about this. So when you buy a stock, you can buy a stock at like $10. Or let's talk about, if you're buying GameStop or if you're buying Bitcoin, for example, right? Because a lot of these guys are crypto investors too. So let's say you bought, a GameStop or at $10. You bought Bitcoin at, maybe $5,000. Bitcoin again at 10, and Bitcoin at 25, Bitcoin at 35. The point is, your dollar cost averaging, you have multiple positions, and therefore your dollar cost average position on the or cost basis on the position is going to change every time you buy up. I bring that up because they may have been heavily shorted, or the hedge funds may have taken a large short position at $10, and then it ran up to 400, and they owe interest on top of the margin call on that short position. But again, if they're working with the master fund, and the master fund clearly knows these are professionals, this is all they do for a living is trade stocks and make money off of it. They're going to take a even larger short position at the higher price, and
right.
so
And
when it goes down, they're going to end up passing their dollar cost average threshold and make a profit on the entire position, including the position they never got it back down to $10. So they don't need to get it back down to $10 in order to make a profit, as long as they're taking a short at a higher position with enough money.
Right. So let's say, I mean, we've got a lot of these investors who, the retail investors, the Reddit investors who've bought it at $10 and sold it at $400. They've made profits of $5,000, $10,000, $50,000. Where is that money coming from? Is that coming from other retail investors who got in late, or so basically there are retail investors who are losing a lot of money buying into GameStop at this point?
Yes, there's a lot of churn. So every buy is met with a sell. So there are people out there who are losing money trying to play this game, and that's the unfortunate circumstance here, is that there are the people that are getting in early are potentially front running this, especially if you have media credibility. And I'm not going to name names because there's no way for me to tell who is in early and who's not and who's starting this. But if you are in early and you are somehow getting everybody on board, then you stand to make a ton of money. And the people that are buying in later are trying to push it up, above a certain price. Like, for example, there was a rumor on GameStop that if they got above $350, then the hedge fund would go out of business. That's a false rumor. And the reason why is the hedge fund by nature is a private company that does not have to disclose, other than once a quarter, if they're above a certain size, what they're invested in. So there was no way to actually know at what point they would supposedly go bankrupt. Now, is it likely that they took losses? Yes, absolutely. And we saw that. And there's the reason why they were bailed out. But we don't know how much money they received in the bailout from the master fund. And we're not going to know either, because it's all private. And so,
Now,
It's there's a lot of just false. There's a lot of fake news out there. It's really what it comes down to, and people are going to take losses if they buy, when they buy in higher, and it's just, I don't. That's just the way the market works. I mean, for everyone if you're going to buy higher, someone's taking profits at that level, especially if they're putting something in a Reddit feed and saying we need to get above a certain level in order to put a dent in this company. There's really no telling that the people that are putting that fake information out there aren't the hedge funds themselves. That's the problem with the situation.
Right. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So, speaking of bailouts,
Yeah,
um,
that's a fun topic, isn't it?
yeah. Well, let's talk about this this COVID bill.
Yeah, let's talk about that, shall we? Who's excited? Who's excited for their $1,400? Even though the bill itself should have been $57.57 for everybody in America, including kids, 330 million people.
Right. So now this is the interesting thing. It's going to cost every American like $6,000.
Yeah, 57 is, depending on how many, like if you divide 1.9 trillion by 330 million people, it's $5,757 a person.
Right. But really, it's going to cost even more than that because I'm not going to pay back a dime of it.
None of us are.
I'm not receiving a check. So so however you want to reconcile that. But that's the thing. Like what most Americans don't realize is that they're not supposed to be paying income tax, which means they're not supposed to be repaying this bailout tax. But at the same time, I am a little bit frustrated with the ignorance of people thinking that, the people who are receiving the check are the people who are paying the taxes. And so for them, it doesn't work out. And that's actually one of the criteria for you to, or at least it was on the first stimulus bill, was in order for you to receive the first check, you had to be current with your taxes for the past couple years,
Sure.
Which is really interesting because this is a coercive nature of getting you to file and declare that your income is taxable. You're basically setting yourself up so that you have to pay a lot of taxes that you wouldn't normally have to pay.
Not only that, but geez, I'm struggling with my tripod here. Sorry about that. Not only that, but the Get My Payment tool. I don't know if you saw the Get My Payment tool when they first put that out.
No.
But the IRS posted a Get My Payment tool page to find out where your payment is in the system, and it included a privacy policy, which was a blatant violation of our Third Amendment right to privacy.
I remember this.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court's never acknowledged it as a Third Amendment right, but that's what it is. And it basically said you have zero right to privacy in this system. I mean, it was a reauthorization of the Patriot Act, is what it was.
Through consent. I remember that. And it said, what did it say?
It's on my Twitter feed.
I'm going to look this up right now.
Yeah, it's probably, I think it's still
I remember it was because here's the thing. Normally, like when you go to a privacy statement on a website, it says things like, on this website, you have no expectation of privacy.
Right. And
theirs was more like, no, if you use this website, you have no expectation of privacy anywhere. Like you're giving us the authority to hack into your phone and view whatever you want.
Yeah, here it is. Actually, I can go ahead and exactly. And there was no limitation. Let's see if I can. Oh yeah, okay. Of course, I don't know if this is the same or not on your page, but on my website here, I know this sounds goofy, right? Because the internet's supposed to be the same everywhere, but it's not, because the government has They have full control over it. But it says that the Get My Payment tool is temporarily offline on my side of the tube over here. So
I yeah, I wasn't even trying to go there. I was looking for here. Let me do because I know there was like a I don't even I wouldn't even touch that website. Here, this is like memes that no, this is something else. But yeah, it's absolutely insane what that thing said. And you know, people are like, and this is the thing. You know, people are like, yeah, but I'm getting a big check out of it.
right.
So
So they're basically giving up all of their rights for
a little check.
a $2,000 check, and and that's the other funny thing. Trump gave a bigger check than Biden.
Yeah.
It's like, come on. This is
like a lot of
gaslighting all over the place.
There were some progressives who were posting online saying, you know, hey, you know, we voted, we busted our ass, we voted for Biden, we got him elected, and we're not getting what we were promised. And somebody replied to that, and basically this was like on Twitter. Somebody said, you know, the next time you accept a bribe, you might want to get the cash up front.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So yeah, it's and now I'm like searching through IRS documents on Google and looking at pictures, and like there's all kinds of holy shit, people's names and addresses and their tax returns and like all kinds of like, where's all this coming from?
What are you looking at?
Pinterest, Reddit. I just Googled where's my payment privacy statements IRS, which isn't even related. But then I go to images on, or actually I'm on DuckDuckGo, and I'm looking at like people's kind of fucking weird.
Wow, that's crazy.
I mean the social security numbers are blanked out, but I see addresses. Yeah, this is and this is interesting too because you know the FHA, right? The FHA is a government program, and it's a privilege to use it, right? This is where we get into like what excise taxes are and that sort of thing. It's a privilege. They don't have to make it to everybody because it's a privilege, right? And most people don't realize being a citizen is a privilege. It's an excise, right? You are sitting there right now, you are not a citizen, but if you go to the government and say, hey, I want to take advantage of a certain privilege, being a citizen, then for that moment, you're a citizen. If you're a US citizen and you believe you're a citizen, go get your passport right now and look for the word citizen in your passport. It's not in there. You are a national. Which is interesting because the U.S. code defines a national as a person having the United States as their highest what do they call it? Highest allegiance or something like that.
That's interesting.
And
it
it's
doesn't
like,
make any reference to national in the Constitution, but it does mention citizen.
Right. Which is really interesting. But the codes actually codify them separately. And it's interesting too because like there's it doesn't say in the Constitution that the government has the authority to turn people into citizens. It says it has the authority to naturalize them.
Right.
And naturalization, and you start digging into the federal codes, naturalization has more to do with nationality than it does with citizenship. So all this stuff is really interesting. But going back to my point about the FHA, if you want to get an FHA loan, if you go to any bank, right, you can ask for a loan, and a bank is just a bank. They can give you a loan without seeing your tax records if they want to. But if you want an FHA loan is a special loan that is backed by the government, It allows the banks to take bigger risks with an insurance program from the federal government. And in order for them to cover that risk, they need to make sure that you are a tax cattle.
Mm.
And
Right.
so for those loans, they require that you show tax returns, and they call it proof of income, but they want to see tax returns, because if you go to these same banks and you say, hey, I want a loan, but not an FHA loan, a lot of these banks will give you a loan without tax returns if you show them bank statements.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
It is. And it's like, okay, so why do they press for these tax returns? Now, this is also interesting, and I can't confirm this from my own two eyes, but from a very trusted source, who's Dave Champion. He explained that and I saw this when I was signing up. We were talking earlier about interactive brokers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I went to sign up on interactive brokers. There's no field for social security number. It's taxpayer identification number, which can be your social security number, but they're not asking for your social security number. They're asking for your taxpayer identification number. And these are two separate concepts according to the law, but it's the same number for a lot of people, conveniently, right? And they do that to confuse people, to make them think like, oh, you mean a social security number? Yeah, I have that here. And now you're saying, I'm a taxpayer, and here's my taxpayer number. And when you go to a bank and they ask you, like, they're sitting on their computer and they say, what's your social security number? They're typing it into a field that says taxpayer identification number.
Right.
Which is like, okay. And what that means is the interest that you're earning on this account is taxable. That's why they want to put it into that field. Now, you can say, I don't have a taxpayer ID because I'm not a taxpayer. And the bank employees who don't know much about any of this stuff will just look at you funny and be like, well, you don't have a social security number, which is actually possible. I do know people who don't have social security numbers.
I do too, actually.
And they will make it very difficult. Now, I just found this out recently because I thought since the Patriot Act, it was impossible to get a bank account without a social security number, which apparently, if you have one, the IRS cannot seize it. It has to have that tax ID on it, the same social security number, tax ID, whatever, or else they can't touch it. I found out recently that there are specific banks that will give you these accounts. They require, massive deposits, like 50 grand or something, but it's totally legal. And it's possible. And there's even brokers who know who these banks are, and they'll sell you that information, and they'll facilitate the opening of the account for, like 5 grand for themselves, which is ridiculous. But if you know where these banks are, you can just do this. But you walk into a regular branch, most of them don't know. I mean, you talk about a basic bank teller at Bank of America. They don't know all the financial products they have. They don't know about every single mortgage they have. They want, like, when you want a mortgage, you talk to a mortgage specialist, right? And so who at that bank knows about all these different products and other things? And so sometimes it's smaller banks, mom and pop banks, which, yes, there are mom and pop banks, still a few in the country, credit unions, all these other things. But anyways, I'm ranting. But yeah, it's all really interesting information. And here James is saying, imagine paying taxes. I can't imagine it.
Well, let's talk about taxes, because I'm probably the next report I'm going to write is probably going to be a report titled "How to Never Pay Taxes Again." And what I intend to do is to write a report of the step-by-step process about how to use a living trust in combination with a charitable remainder trust, and to have all of your personal financial interests set up as LLCs that are general partnerships, limited partnerships rather, in which you're the GP 1% owner, and the limited partner, I believe, is the trust, is the 99% owner. And when you do that sort of thing, as long as you are working for yourself, and you have clients that are paying into the business that is owned by the trust, then you can limit your tax liability. And this is how This is how it's done. This is why.
This is how Trump pays $750 in taxes every year.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, there was one I learned a few years ago, and I think the regulations have changed, but I think it's so. In Belize, you can get what's called an IBC, an international business company, and this goes down to like the Panama thing and everything else. All these countries that allow you to form corporations. And what's interesting is they have 0% tax on any business that operates as an IBC. The only caveat is you can't do business within Belize, right? And so the reason for that is they want you to transfer all your money in there, but if you're doing business in Belize, they want to tax you, right? So you got a different form of business. They just want their banks to be able to make interest on your deposits. But so what you would do is you would set up an IBC, and you have your business running in the United States, and then you'd say something like, okay, well, we have $1 million profit. Let's reinvest this entire $1 million on an advertising campaign. And so you would pay this Belize company, who's your advertising company, $1 million. You'd write off the $1 million as a deduction. So now you have $0 profit because you want the business to grow. $0 profit means $0 in tax. But the money is sitting in this company in Belize, and you have, I don't know, you hire some employees in the Philippines who do your advertising, and now you don't pay any taxes. The money's just sitting in Belize tax-free. I think they did start adding, the money is there, and then, as every government gets greedy, they said, hey, we're going to start taxing some of this money that's coming in. So, those rules are always changing, but it's interesting, like all these guys that are, they're always, this is where you want to open your offshore trust and all this other stuff. They're always moving around to like new places. I've heard of Mauritius was one, which is somewhere near Madagascar, I think. And it just like all these like crazy places, and all they do is they find these small little governments that they can bribe with a few $1 million to say, hey, we want to set up some businesses here. And once there's enough businesses there, that's when the government, the US government and some other international governments come along. And of course they're much bigger than the millionaires that paid off the rulers of these small island nations, these small banana republics. And they basically say, hey, stop it. That's our money to tax. And they pay these guys off even more. And they strong arm them into like saying, hey, we can't do that anymore. The US wants their cut. It's insane how that works.
The other thing is with the FATCA laws too. I mean, if you're politically connected, then you can get away with anything. But if you're not, or if you're a target of the government, then they can go after you anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's insane. I've seen documents here in Mexico, in Poland. I dealt with a company in Poland, and they wanted to, as soon as they found out I'm an American, they needed all kinds of extra tax information for like background check and like all this other like financial compliance shit, so that I can open an account with them. And it's like, you have no ties to the United States. Why do you need this information? And it's because the United States, it runs deep within the entire world's financial systems. I mean, it's like the way, imagine this. You got Visa, which is completely international, right? If Visa accepts payments for I don't know. Let's say gambling, right? Internet gambling. If Visa accepts payments for gambling in a country where gambling is legal, they can be prosecuted in the United States because they're an American company or because they have an American footprint. And it's like this ability to prosecute them in the United States for things that they do in another country is an ability to completely control them and manipulate everything that they're doing around the world, which is insane. Like, you don't need to change the laws of these other countries. You just need to manipulate other people who are operating in that country, and it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's going to change all that, though.
No, it's not. No, it isn't.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you were kind of blowing my mind yesterday with all these things you were saying about Bitcoin, and like, I don't know its true origin, but you say it's got a pretty dark origin.
I do. I'm a big fan of crypto and the concept of cryptocurrency. But unfortunately, for a lot of the Bitcoin people out, the Bitcoiners out there, we're all getting conned. Bitcoin is a big lie. And it's interesting because you were talking a second ago about the financial system and about how expansive it is and how the reach is global. In December of 2017, I did some research into Bitcoin, and I was trading the markets. I needed to make some money. At that point, I had been dealing with government, USA Patriot Act sponsored government entrapment, obstruction, and interference since 2012. So I was 5 years in at that point, and and part of the way I was keeping myself afloat was through trading. And so crypto trading, that this was the second time at that point that I had run $2,500 into 80K. The first time was in Forex while I was in business school. And the second time I did it was in crypto in that 3-month period at the Q4 of 2017. And when I attempted to pull my money out, so I put $2,500 in, I got it in through Coinbase, I transferred it via Ether to Bitfinex, and then I traded on Bitfinex in a corporate account so that I would only have to pay, what my profits are, as opposed to in a personal account, you have to pay taxes on all gains and your losses are minimized to $3,000. So you need to make sure you're trading. If you're an active trader, it needs to be in an LLC or a corporate account so that you only pay in a P&L. Anyway, I digress. So after that, after I ran the money up to 80K and I tried pulling it out, an overnight wire from Bitfinex took 23 days. An overnight wire took 23 days. That was enough time for me to go to Puerto Rico and come back to find out if I was going to end up moving there to get away from all the government obstruction. I said, if the government's going to harass me, I might as well live on a beach somewhere. So that's the reason why I ended up going to Puerto Rico. So 23 days. And in that 23-day period, I did all sorts of research. I called, the brokers were shutting down my accounts, saying that I was harassing people, harassing their customer service, agents. And, I always use my please and thank yous. It's only in private or to the government that I tell them to F off. But, so there was at no point that I've ever harassed a customer service agent. But yeah, that was the excuse that they were giving to me. And as soon as my ID card verified my identity on their automatic KYC platforms, they shut down my account. So at that point, I realized, well, there might be a problem here. And I emailed FinCEN. And I said, hey, you're apparently shutting down all of my accounts on the brokers. What's the deal? And they said, oh, well, you need to go talk to the brokers. Anyway, it was a big ordeal. And it took 23 days and then to get the money out. And it was at that point that I realized that blockchain is being used as a means to provide rapid and efficient and effective transparency in financial transactions all around the world. And they were replacing SWIFT with it because it took them 23 days to figure out how I got the money in and how I was able to trade it and everything else. Whereas if all of our transactions were on blockchain, then they can easily connect A to B to C to D and do it like that, and it would be done instantaneously. And so the government has a vested interest in putting everyone's transactions on the blockchain so that they can expand and improve their surveillance capacity. So they have the motive. Now, let's talk about, okay, well, they have the motive. How does this relate to Bitcoin? Well, a month later, I went to Miami. It was a crypto conference, and I ran into some DoD personnel. And again, because I'm a Marine, so people open up to me if they're related to the DoD, Department of Defense. And one person in particular said to me, yeah, I agree with you. Bitcoin is suspect at best. The white paper was floating around the DoD in 2008. Now, 2008 is when Bitcoin first came out. In 2010, Bitcoin was hacked. And if you want to go to my Medium, my Medium account, I think it's medium.com / vote Joe McHugh, I think is what it is. And you can see 2 articles that I wrote on this particular topic. One was called "Can Terrorists Hack Bitcoin?" And the second one was "Bitcoin's Dark Secret." And in those articles, I wrote about how Bitcoin was hacked in 2010. And Satoshi Nakamoto and others, they came to the rescue. They realized that 184 billion Bitcoin were created fraudulently, and that they quickly conducted what's called a 51% attack on the Bitcoin network back in 2010 to orphan the 184 billion Bitcoin off the chain, literally off the chain, right? The problem is that just like with cash, if you counterfeit a bunch of money and you put it in a suitcase, the money still exists in that suitcase. It doesn't matter if it's not on a bank ledger or if you didn't write it down in your books, the money still physically exists. And that Bitcoin, the 184 billion Bitcoin, still physically existed on a separate blockchain, just like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond, all these other Bitcoin versions forked off the main Bitcoin blockchain. This particular hack created a blockchain in which there were 184 billion Bitcoin. Now, I mention all this because when I was in Puerto Rico for all of 2018, I ran into a lot of very interesting people. I love them. They were great. They're very interesting, and they had a lot of interesting perspectives and a lot of interesting experience. And I was able to piece together the plan as a result of hundreds of conversations with individuals that gave me a little bit here and a little bit there. And, the intelligence community operates on a need-to-know basis, just like the military. And if you don't need to know, you don't know. You only know what you need to know so that nobody knows the whole picture. Well, because I was under surveillance for so long, and I was pretty good at identifying who was surveilling me and who wasn't, they kept having to send new people towards me to keep me under surveillance. And it's like everyone I talked to, they dropped a little bit extra knowledge, just a little bit, that I was able to piece together into, like, basically complete the puzzle, a 10,000 piece puzzle. I was basically, this goes here, this goes there, whatever. And so what I learned is that the CIA actually has agents in Venezuela and probably other parts of the world, like Iran and other places, that were exporting inflation to those countries and driving the people in those countries off of their local currency and onto blockchain, in Bitcoin in particular, because they need to have a place to keep the value. If we think that it's crazy that Bitcoin is gone up to $57,000 as of today in US dollar terms, imagine what it's like in Venezuelan, I don't know what it is, if it's
Bolivia or something.
Bolivar, right?
Bolivar, yeah.
So imagine what it's like in the Bolivar terms, or imagine what it would be like in Iranian whatever lira, I think, or something like that in their terms. Bitcoin will be priced exponentially higher in those local currencies because the inflation rate is that much higher relative to those local currencies. So Bitcoin is actually a platform to get everyone in the world onto a single currency. Now, okay, fine, that sounds great, Joe. We love your conspiracy theories, but how does it work and how can you prove it, right? Well, and in 184 billion Bitcoin, it's not part of the 21 million, blah, blah, blah. It's all BS. Okay, sure. They have to find a way to launder the money back into the system. They accomplished that in 2017. Do you remember the SegWit argument with Bitcoin? Between that and Bitcoin Cash, there was a big argument about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the SegWit, and most people are like, well, WTF is SegWit, right? And so Segregated Witness, SegWit stands for Segregated Witness, which again is kind of like quantitative easing. What is quantitative easing? Well, it's called inflation. That's what it is, but they're trying to make it sound like something it's not. Segregated Witness is money laundering. Segregated Witness, all they did there was they created a new security protocol to allow underage drinkers to walk into a bar without getting their ID checked. To put it in terms of crypto, they allowed people to spend money on the blockchain without checking the transaction IDs to make sure that the transactions were valid. Now, the way that they're able to accomplish this, the only way that this would work is at some point, if the transactions were merged onto the Bitcoin blockchain that everyone believes that we're using, which is the 21 million Bitcoin. That would happen once they have enough. The one chain, the fraudulent chain, becomes longer than the existing chain, and that would only happen if the miners were complicit and allowed it to happen. But the interesting part here is that Segregated Witness allows the miners to actually save money by not checking the transaction IDs. Effectively, to put it in the context of the bar concept, you can fire the bouncer and save money. That's what they did. And so if someone comes to about the miners, of which, by the way, you need 51% control in order to do this, 75% of the blockchain now resides in the hands of, I think, 6 miners. So the 51% attack it's already there. All you need is to get 6 groups of boards of directors on board with this concept. And every board of directors has one single motive, which is to make a profit. So if you can show them how they can make more profit by simply looking the other way, and oh, by the way, here's a bribe under the table, they're all going to take the deal. And that's exactly what's been going on. And so when you run the numbers, you've got a lot of people are talking about how 99% of the wealth is in the hands of the 1%. If you think that's bad, wait until you get onto Bitcoin, because 184 billion, 21 million is the total supply cap. 21 million represents 0.01% of the total supply. 99.99% of Bitcoin supply is in government hands. Think about that.
Wow.
That means that they can bribe anyone in the world. And we already know that the government is not working for us. They're working against us. They passed the Patriot Act. They turned the secret FISA courts, and they turned it on Americans. And now we're all under surveillance all the time. And you have 2 choices from the Federal Reserve. You can either comply and fall in line, and we'll allow you to live and have a job and have a family, or you can resist, and we're going to take away all of your liberties. We're going to take away your life. We're going to make it a living hell. Or, and this happened to me, they may actually threaten your life, or worse, the lives of your friends and family. I actually had an Airbnb tenant say to me, do you like to see your friends and family get hurt? And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Who the hell? And she was hot. She was like a hot, blonde European, Eastern European looking chick from New York City. And I was like, God, you just ruined it. We can't even fool around now. It's like, I was not happy. Anyway.
I want to, because one of the reasons we started talking about this yesterday was because I asked, how plausible is it that, the United States government is creating all these bailouts to just print a shit ton of money so that they can buy all the Bitcoin. And you're saying they've already got all the Bitcoin. But now that you're telling me about, Venezuela, and which makes sense, right? We already know the CIA sneaks into all kinds of countries, and then they whisper in somebody's ear, hey, you guys shouldn't be putting up with this. Start a protest. And they start these revolutions in these countries this way. And when you have, and I know there's a lot more going on in Venezuela than just that, but we have hyperinflation going on there. So could that have been created by the government to force people off of that currency, either onto the dollar or into blockchain, but or Bitcoin specifically. But so now, now that they're printing all this money, is it possible that they're ready? Because and we talked about this last night too. The Federal Reserve has always said, like, oh, a very healthy rate of inflation is 3%, even though it's closer to 10. They've always said 3%, and they always say it is 3%. Yeah, but so is it possible they're finally just like, okay, fuck it, we're done, we're switching to another currency, let's inflate the hell out of this so that everybody has to switch?
Yes. Not only is it possible, I think it's probable, and I think it's happening now. How do I say this? I believe that the plan has been exposed to get off of fiat current dollar, the traditional national currencies, and it's been exposed to get onto Bitcoin. And so, and not only that, but not only has the plan been exposed, but the people have been exposed, and they're still in power. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, the American people just reelected another neoconservative who's on board. President Biden is no different than President Bush, who originally hijacked America with the Patriot Act and 9/11. And so it's funny comments here. You just ruined it. Anyway, so you asked, is it possible? I say yes. Not only is it possible, I think it's highly likely. When your plan is exposed and you still have power, what do? You step on the gas, and that's exactly what's going on. And so, in just the first 50 days, President Biden. And of course, he's just the face. It's really Vice President Harris, because everything that's happening in the Biden administration is in the form of an executive order, and she's the attorney here, not the 78-year-old president, right, who fumbles over his own words, right? So she's running the show, and I'm disappointed. I had high hopes for her, and unfortunately, she's proven to be just like everyone else. So I
don't even think she's in charge. I think it's still the same old.
Well, somebody's running the show, but she's still, I don't know, she's still complicit. She's there, right? I mean, I guess everybody's complicit. Everyone's given a choice. You can play ball or you can die, or
exactly. And she's happy to play ball.
Yeah, everyone, and so that's I don't know. I would like to think that she and many of these other people that are all involved would take the opportunity to gain our liberty if given the chance. We'll see. But so the question is, is it possible? I think it is not only possible, I think it's going to happen in President Biden's first term. We're going to see a global flip from traditional fiat currencies to U.S. government Bitcoin. And it's going to happen in these 4 years before the next election, because when your plan's been exposed and the people have been exposed, you just got to get to the end, the goal line before anyone can stop you. And once they do that, it's over, because they already have total control of the internet. They've got total control of our finances. And once they have it all in the blockchain, they will be able to just turn off your wallet and you'll be screwed, because there will no longer be physical coins and cash. They'll just turn off your electronic wallet and you're done.
Right? And they've been, I remember one of my first conspiracy theory videos that I ever watched. I think it was Zeitgeist. And they were talking about, that was always the future, right? That you're going to have the chip in your hand, and that's going to have your bank account on it, and all this other stuff. And I think, that's kind of what you're talking about. But of course, what's interesting about Bitcoin, and I know there's ways to trace it, but you can always create alternate wallets. And I mean, until the point where you order something online and you tell them to ship it to your address, and you're now connecting your wallet with that money, it's as far as they know, that's not yours. Don't you think that's like don't you think that kind of puts a kink in their plan?
Well, let me ask you this. Yesterday, we were just talking about the court system and how there are a bunch of fraudulent courts, and that and you and I also were recently dealing with, and I still am, some nosiness by interactive brokers, even though they've already confirmed our identities and the source of funds. They, for whatever reason, they want to know more, and those are with accounts that have already been identified, right? So, and when you have a system in which we have no right to privacy, quote, in this system, which was the Get My Payment reauthorization tool, which is effectively reauthorizing the USA Patriot Act, where we have no right to privacy in the system, do you think the US government is going to allow you to spend money on the blockchain without identifying yourself? Do you really think that's going to happen? I don't.
I see. So basically, if they control more than 51%, they can make that 51% say only transactions from approved accounts are able to go through.
Yes, and they already have that control because, again, 6 miners control 75% of the market.
Right. That's interesting. Now, what I mean, we were talking about Ethereum and some of these others, and James is actually, I got this question here. James was actually asking about Monero. Do you think any of these are a solution to that, or do they have the same flaw where ultimately the government can print a shit ton of money, or they have all the Bitcoin, they can trade all the Bitcoin for all the Monero, all the Ethereum, and everything else, and have, you know, the lion's share of any of these currencies? Do you think that any of these things are safe from that type of takeover?
So Monero is interesting. Unfortunately, it's not secure either. And it kills me to say this because I was really hopeful that there might be something good out there. And the only one that I've been able to find is Ethereum and now Bitcoin Cash because they forked off of it. Monero, the article, and I couldn't find it after I found it once, and then it just disappeared from my searches. But there's something called Blackhawk. I think it's Blackhawk Security or Blackhawk Protocol or something like that. And it was the same protocol used in Litecoin and in Bitcoin and a lot of other things. And Monero uses it as well, and that allows for a similar hack. I do not recall the specifics of it at this point, but Monero is not secure either. The only one that I know that is that well, I don't, that I believe to be secure is Ethereum and Bitcoin Cash because Bitcoin Cash forked before the SegWit.
But wouldn't Bitcoin Cash? I mean, let's say, for example, if all of the so I guess because of the SegWit, they couldn't get those 100 whatever billion Bitcoins back in, but they could get them back in, I guess, by if they control 75% of the Bitcoin miners, switch all those miners over to Bitcoin Cash, and now they control 75% of that, or probably even more because there's fewer people mining Bitcoin Cash. So
sure.
So having that control, having that 75%, they'd be able to convert Bitcoin Cash into. They'd be able to add the SegWit. They'd be able to add all kinds of just crazy coins without having to do the mining. And I mean, like that's the thing. Actually, I think, like, even though it is blockchain, if you have, like, without just by fiat, just by saying, hey, we're going to add 1 million new coins to this one address, if you control 75% of the network and 75% of the network approves that, like, that's still possible.
Right. Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of different ways to make something happen. So that leaves Ethereum, effectively.
Ethereum could. I mean, they could do the same thing, right? If they were to turn all their miners over to Ethereum.
I don't know enough about the Ethereum mining process to know how that works and whether or not and what their security protocols are, but So it's possible, and that's one of the situations where I don't know. I have not found the holes in Ethereum, but I'm not a coder, and I have to rely on other people's articles that are written. So it is possible that Ethereum could also be hacked. Either way, and this kind of leads into what we were just talking about in terms of liberty. I mean, because you ran for president as a libertarian candidate. You know that I ran for president as an independent. You're running for governor in Texas, and as a matter of fact, one of my plans is to start doing some research on the state of Michigan budget and potentially run for governor as a libertarian candidate here in Michigan. And what I would like to see happen is to kind of secede as an individual, or secede kind of like as a state by state basis, not like officially say we're done with the union, but to launch a nature-backed cryptocurrency that if we're not, either one of us are not the president, we're not able to end the Fed. And what I like to say is go green instead by replacing the Federal Reserve Bank with a credit union, so that we can go get clean, green, citizen-owned, and fully transparent with our money. If we're not able to do that from the top down as a president, then perhaps the bottom up approach is a better way. And I feel that a cryptocurrency that is backed by nature is a good way to tie money to our natural environment, which is important because without clean air, fresh water, and healthy organic food, we get sick and we die. And so liberty is predicated upon a healthy environment. So we can't be, so our money needs to tie into that. And the traditional experience or explanation of money is that it's a store of value and an exchange and a medium of exchange, but it's also a means for connecting our monetary system and in consumer behavior with our surrounding environment. And it should be used to support a healthy, wealthy living environment. And if we don't have nature protected, then we're all going to end up dying anyway. So we could set up a state-by-state credit union. So for example, in Texas, right, where you want to run or where you are running, and Texas just had a big storm down there and wiped out the power grid, and a bunch of people are now paying electricity through the nose, like $15,000 bills, and gas heat went out, and all sorts of crazy things. If you had a credit union established for the state of Texas, and it were backed by nature-backed crypto money, Texas dollar, whatever you want to call it, then the way it would work is that the state of Texas would take state parks, parklands, land and water. They would place that into trust, conservation trust, and then they would issue cryptocurrency against it using, I would say, a GPS, 10-digit code or whatever for each fraction of the currency. They would be able to issue the currency against it. And then for the money that'll be your supply cap, because there's only so much land and water in Texas, right? So supply capped, it's backed by specific geographical areas in Texas. And in order to harvest or mint new currency, land and water needs to be placed into conservation trust. If it's natural, it needs to get back to 100% fully restored in order to get a full harvest. And if it's built environment, then you want to get it to 50% net zero impact. The money that's raised, the fiat money that's invested into the currency that people would put into in order to preserve the value of money as the U.S. dollar goes down the shitter, I guess. I'm trying not to swear, but I guess I have to work on my vocab. Anyway, the money that's raised as part of those auctions would be reinvested back into consumer loans to help homeowners get off of oil and gas and utilities. So they actually would be able to own geothermal heating and cooling or some other carbon-free equivalent. They would actually be able to own solar panels and own water aquifer, water barrels in their front yard, so that they'd have a decentralized system for their house that they can actually own, and they're no longer beholden to the utility companies. And when the centralized system fails, they don't go down with it. So that's what I'd like to propose. And the thing is that when that's owned by the people, and what I propose is that it's 50%, it's wholly owned by the people, but you can also use the money to fund companies and that sort of thing. And every company that you create off of that is 50% ownership through the credit union. All the profits go back to the people. And since every individual in the state of Texas, or if we did it on a national basis, every individual is a shareholder or a member in the credit union, the profits are equally distributed to everybody. So it's kind of like Andrew Yang's citizen dividend without using taxes to get it done. So if we did that on a state-by-state level, we could potentially eliminate income taxes and who knows what, just by going with monetary policy.
So, I want to ask, because this was an interesting conversation that came up with somebody. Somebody asked, well, what is Bitcoin backed by? I kind of went into the explanation that Bitcoin isn't backed by anything the way gold isn't backed by anything. It is the original asset, whereas you have something like a dollar, which is fiat, but it's fiat now, but originally it was a derivative asset. Like, it was backed by something because it was a derivative. And so when you talk about having a blockchain, first of all, I mean, you're talking about having a different kind of blockchain, because right now the blockchain generates new currency just as a process of using it, but you're talking about a central authority being able to issue new currency based on the condition of nature. But I think there's a problem with that, because there's, while it sounds great, it also sounds great to have a paper currency that's backed one-to-one with gold. And if they want to issue new currency, they need new gold. And that's how it was for a while until it wasn't. Somebody got greedy and said, so what's the restraint on that? And when you have blockchain, like, you can write some code that says, okay, we're going to have a new cryptocurrency that is directly backed by Bitcoin. So whenever a new Bitcoin appears on the blockchain, this new currency will programmatically, be directly connected. But when you have something like, it's not within the same system. Somebody needs to observe it and measure it and enter it into a computer, and so that means somebody can make up new numbers. They can say, oh, we have 5,000 new acres of forest somewhere in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And computationally, it'll say, like, okay, that means we can make more money. So there's always to kind of screw with that. So I don't know. These are just some ideas popping into my head. But, like, how do you see that? How do you see that working with all these things considered?
Sure. Well, let's start with the easy pun, the high level view, right, of a forest popping up in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. One of the benefits, if we are going to look for the positive side of our current state of absolute total entrapment in America, is the fact that we have satellite surveillance everywhere. And in the military, what I learned is that they're able to find a dime-sized object anywhere in the world using their satellites, which means that you're not going to have a forest popping up in the middle of the ocean if you make it open source. And so so long as it's open source and it's tied to an objective and verifiable record, like, for example, GPS satellite data, then you're not going to be able to falsify the record. Now, you mentioned the aspect of involving people in a situation, right? So even on the gold standard, there were people involved, and it was something called free coinage. And so what happened was that people would end up so you've seen perhaps maybe like African tribes, and they're wearing African or even Native American tribes and that sort of, they're wearing a lot of gold bracelets and necklaces and stuff. That gold was actually, that's money. They acquired that through transactions, and that turned out to be money. In early America, what we did is they took gold either through transactions or if it was jewelry or whatever, and they would melt it down and they would press it into a coin, and that process was called free coinage, and it allowed people to create coins for exchange out of their wealth, and it was all set according to standard weights and measures, which is the exact phrase listed in Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution. So even under the gold standard, there were people involved in that situation. Now, with that in mind, moving on to a nature-backed system, it's not as objective, and this is my concern, my only really remaining concern in the system is that a gold standard does have an objective standard weights and measurement system, as long as the scale itself is not rigged, which happened. We know that. Right. But nature could have an objective. We can establish a broad framework of objective criteria that are easily ascertained by the individual, that do not require expert input. And I think that's absolutely critical for the success of it, because as soon as you rely on experts to tell you what's real and what isn't, you are ceding your liberty to somebody else. And that is exactly what's going on right now in America with this coronavirus, where we have a president and a lot of other people telling us that we need to trust the experts and trust the scientists.
They're experts. They're scientists.
Right, exactly. You know, that's the problem, right? So we have to move back into the other room because my power is running low. But the thing about science is that it's never settled. And that's the beauty of it, is that it's always in a process of being refined, in theory, for the betterment of science. And so because it's never settled, you're constantly refining, and the laws of physics, we're still working on refining that. Do you want to go outside? Is that what you want? Yeah, go ahead. Outside. Good. So the moment that we get so confident to say that, let me go back to the list so you can see my face, that everything, that the science is settled, well, that is potentially problematic, especially in a system where a lot of the scientific journals are funded by oil and gas money. They're funded by pharmaceutical companies. They're funded by special interests. And this is not a conspiracy theory. My sister is a biologist, and she works up in Canada, and she was sued for refusing to change her report so that it matched the desired outcome of the oil company that wanted to tear down a forest and destroy a river, or whatever it is they wanted to do. So it's not just like made up conjecture. The science is bought and paid for by the corporations who are owned by, guess who? The Federal Reserve, because whoever has the money makes the rules. And when they can just print money out of nowhere, they just go off and buy a bunch of corporate shares so that they can control everybody on the board of directors. Right. And if you control all the corporations and the board of directors and all the corporations, you control the people. It's over. Right.
We have to bail them out by buying all their stock. Okay, that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, here's another thing. Why are we not funding the people directly? You know what, Dan? You and I can solve the coronavirus crisis like that tomorrow. If we just if we passed a bill, and let's say we know that $1,400 is about 25% of the total bill that the $2 trillion that they just passed. So if we wanted to spend $1,400 per person, what we could do is pass a $500 billion bill, $1,400 per person for every man, woman, and child in America. If you want a vaccine, go get it. If you want instead to get sunshine and vitamin A and vitamin D and fresh air and healthy food, you can go do that too. But ultimately, it's your choice about what you want to do, because that's what natural rights are based on. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. You know all this stuff, and everybody that's watching knows this stuff too. But That's what's going on. And what drives me absolutely nuts is that we have people that are acting like these centralized, these bills, these massive bills, which I think really cannot. Probably the best explanation for it is money laundering. Who knows what they're doing with the money, but they're saying that the money's going towards something, but there's no accountability. We don't actually know where our money's going. It's just driving me nuts. The centralized control is so complete that and it's so disappointing, and they're just inflating away the value of our money. And when debt is money, you can measure inflation by the increase in debt from point A to point B. So just from the year 2000 to 2021, the US debt has grown from 5.6 trillion to 27 trillion, and in the next 4 years it's going to be above 30 trillion easily. It'd probably be 35 trillion in the next 4 years. So that right there, if we take 27 trillion minus 5.6, you've got 20, you get
it's going to
21.4, whatever. It works out to like 19% per year.
It's going to be in the four. It's, I mean, what? It more than doubles every, 4 years, 8 years?
Doubles every 72. So 10 times 7 is 70. So you get a doubling every 72.
No. That's based on the percentage. 72 is divided percent. But like, what was the
It's gone up by 387% since 2000. And because our fiat money is debt, that means that's how much more money there is in circulation.
Right. So I'm super confused. I just pull up this like, okay, whatever. I'm looking at something else. But yeah, and Heather mentioned something about the Liberty Dollar Foundation, and this was something that I learned about a long time ago. I don't know how much you know about them, but
I don't know anything about it. I'd love to
basically know. These guys, it blew my mind when I learned about this, because I wanted to do something similar, right? I wanted to create a gold or silver based currency, except I wanted to do something more like PayPal. And I learned about these guys, and basically what they were doing was they were putting silver coins away in a vault, and they were issuing silver certificates, and then they were taking silver and they were minting their own coins. They were like 1 ounce silver coins, and they had a Statue of Liberty on it. It was called the Liberty Dollar. And they were sued and charged, and they had everything confiscated with counterfeiting, because their coins had the word dollar on it. Now, at the same time I learned about this, I'm sitting there watching TV, and there's like these fucking coins, these gold buffalo nickels on, late night TV, like, yes, buy these gold, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. And and they're like $60 or something. And I'm like, how could they possibly sell a $60 coin that has to have like no gold on it? Then I started doing the research. Oh, it's gold clad, which is like a bullshit fancy way of saying it's gold plated. It has like 0.01 grams of gold. And so you're actually getting like 5 cents worth of gold, and they're charging you $60. Wow. And it comes with a certificate, which was signed off on by the US government, saying you can buy this coin.
Of course,
and it looks like the I think it was the Buffalo nickel or the Buffalo penny. And I'm like, how is this not counterfeiting when it looks so much like the original, but in gold? It's bullshit. But the government was endorsing that because it was absolutely worthless. Meanwhile, they're putting people in prison because they wrote the word dollar on it, which brings me to this question of, what if they had been doing that overseas and importing the coins? Because think about it. You can import Canadian dollars, Canadian silver dollars in the United States, and it says dollar on it, and it's not counterfeiting.
That's interesting.
So imagine, and they have like all these different rules. Like you can buy, they call them silver rounds. They're not silver dollars. They're silver rounds. You can't even call them coins, even though they're coins. Kind of like how Chuck E. Cheese, you can't call them coins. You call them tokens. It's amazing how much they want to control even the language. so much on this. It's absolutely insane.
Words are the tools of thought. 1984, right? So if you control the words that we learn,
Yeah.
then you control the thoughts that we can express and even think.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. Bernard von Nothus. I think she's saying that's the guy who was running the Liberty Dollar. But and there's a few others. There was gold money, which is I think it was kind of like what I was trying to create, but the basically a gold backed PayPal kind of thing.
Sure.
And I think they even issued credit cards, which that was something I wanted to do, but that was kind of where I hit my roadblock, because I was like, okay, so they're telling me I need $10 million in surety bonds, and I need a license in all 50 states, which is going to cost several $1,000,000 more, and lawyers and all this other shit. And I'm like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. That has a ridiculously high barrier of entry. And it's really, when we talk about how much the banks suck, I've got a small credit union that I use for a lot of my stuff, and I'm pretty happy with them. They're not, one of these big evil banks. I met a guy in Texas who owned his own bank. He was a friend of a friend, and he was a pretty cool guy. He was just like a small local bank just to be in business. And then I learned, and I was trying to do this in like 2011, 2012. I learned in 2008, because of the housing crisis and like all the regulations and everything, that when I was trying to do this in 2012, there had not been a single bank chartered since 2008. And that continued until 2016, when Trump got into office, and he actually reversed some of the damage that was done from that. I haven't heard a whole lot of people talk about that, but so from 2008 to 2016, over the entire Obama administration, there were no new banks formed. Only consolidation, only banks being shut down, taken over by bigger banks. It's insane. And that's how you control the financial industry. And we talk about how there's all these evil banks and everything. And it's like, well, yeah, because, you might trust your cousin with your money, but he's not allowed to open a bank because that's a crime. Unless he's got $50 million to start. It's insane, but this is how they control us.
So to build on that, do you want to talk about control? This is how Bitcoin plays into that, right? So we already know that it's going to be full transparency, and that the people in power are going to be able to pick and choose on which, who they want to prosecute and for what reason, when they already do that. These coronavirus bills that are going through, a fraction of the money is actually going directly to the people. We know for a fact, according to the Federal Reserve's own charts, that in the first bill that was passed in March of last year, a year ago, the stock market reversed massively on I think it was $3 trillion in new capital that flooded the market. And so when the money goes directly to these corporations, they're able to spend that money to buy small mom and pop shops, independent entrepreneurs, and that sort of thing, right? So when you collapse the economy, when you shut everything down, what happens to the price of individual smaller companies? It goes down, right? Because they're bringing in less revenue, right? So their forward earnings are now lower because it's potentially a distressed asset, a risky company. And so these guys are coming in with large pots of money, and they're buying out a lot of these mom and pop shop companies. And I'm doing now. I'm in the construction space now all of a sudden, because I refuse to go get a corporate job, because that's what they want to do. And the moment that I start giving my time to a corporation is the moment that I will never have the opportunity to innovate and to read and to write and to be an entrepreneur or run for office again. So I'm committed to the entrepreneurial game. So I was looking for an opportunity, and one of my buddies told me that he's doing construction. So I decided that I was going to go learn how to do siding with him, and that's what I'm doing. And so what he told me is exactly that there is now a 7-month wait for people to get siding on their homes because the companies are being bought up. And not only are all the companies, the construction firms being bought up, but people are getting unemployment and people don't want to work. And so now all of a sudden what you have is the perfect recipe for an expansion of corporate control over the last remaining vestige of liberty in America, which is the entrepreneurial class. And they're now being bought out and squeezed out because even if you refuse to sell, a lot of them are vendors or working with corporations, and they purchase their products and services, from corporations. And so, for example, in this particular siding space, the labor portion of it, even if you happen to be an independent contractor, is only getting 10% of the contract. 10%. That means that you've got maybe 30%, for materials, if that. Typically, it's like 30-40% for time and materials, and the time portion includes the labor, which means that they have 50-60% profit margin. Now, if it's only 10% for time and maybe 10 or 20% for materials, they've expanded their profit margin by squeezing out the middle class and the entrepreneurial class. And so, again, just like in Nazi Germany, they knocked on my neighbor's door, but I didn't say anything because he wasn't me. And eventually there was no one left to take care of me. Well, that's what's going on in America because now the last people standing are the entrepreneurs, and now they're getting squeezed out. And that's why everything, if you look at my Twitter feed or Facebook feed, it's a little bit repetitive, but all I'm trying to do is to point out the fact that whoever has the money makes the rules. And if we want liberty in America, it starts with one thing: end the Fed and go green instead with a credit union that's clean, green, citizen-owned, and fully transparent. It all starts and ends with whoever owns the money. And we need to regain control of our money.
I want you to explain this to me one more time because I'm trying to process it. But so I have a friend. I was telling you about this yesterday, and I think you just gave me more information, or maybe you said it yesterday, and it was kind of like in one ear and out the other. But so I have a friend in Iowa who lives in a city that was damaged by a tornado that came through like 6 months ago. And they haven't been able to do a lot of things. And I get it. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Normally they're not used to, repairing that much stuff. And so everybody's overworked, spread too thin, whatever the case. But materials are on back order. They're unable to get them into the state, and siding, which is what you're doing, is one of the things that she needs. And so something that you just said about how they're squeezing out these businesses. You mentioned that you've got people on, receiving unemployment or COVID bailouts and everything else, so they don't need to work. So there's less people working, which is, that's the socialist fantasy, right? You don't have to work. You can just sit home and collect the money. Right. So there's less work to be done, which means the homes are falling apart because nobody's doing the work. Right. But you're also talking about the businesses themselves are, it sounds like, being consolidated into big corporate organizations where there's be mom and pop siding businesses anymore. It's only going to be, the McDonald's of siding, and you can only call one company and that's it.
That's exactly what's happening. Can we pause for 2 minutes? I need to use a restroom. I drank like 4 glasses of water. Now
well, you go run and I'll keep talking.
All right, cool. I'll be right back.
So yeah, this is really interesting. And we were talking also, I don't know, I've probably mentioned it on the show before about Texas. Maybe not, because I haven't many shows since I went to Texas and they had that ice storm and everything else. But so this is really interesting about Texas with the freeze and everything. When people's homes froze, because they're not designed for that, the pipes broke. Water freezes into ice, it expands. The pipes are made of metal and they crack. And then the ice melts and now everything's just leaking. So this created a lot of problems and they needed a lot of plumbers to come in and fix this. The problem is it's a lot of work that needs to be done. There aren't enough plumbers. So where do you get the extra plumbers for? Well, where do you get the extra plumbers from? Well, normally you would just say, put an ad up on, I don't know, everybody's going to hire a couple apprentices and say, hey, you're going to learn how to do plumbing work and you can get 1 million people to start doing this. Unfortunately, you need to have a license to do plumbing in Texas. How wonderful. And so because this is now an emergency, the governor gave us all special permission. If you have a license to plumb in another state, you can come to Texas and plumb. If you have an expired plumber's license, which means you know what you're doing, you just haven't been paying the government's extortion fee, you'll be allowed to fix the plumbing until the governor says, it's not an emergency anymore. Back to our regular set of normally certified, allowed plumbers are allowed to work now. It's just, they don't care. Anyways, Joe's back.
So, tell me what you're chatting about.
I was just ranting about how the plumbing thing that we talked about yesterday, the plumbing in Texas and how they're allowing people to work without licenses.
Right, so that's a way that they're able to constrict the supply, right?
Exactly.
Supply of personnel. So they're constricting supply of personnel with licensing restrictions, and for no reason other than the government wants to use that as a revenue source. Right. And they're constricting the supply of active labor participants through unemployment. So now all of a sudden you have entrepreneurial shops, you have small businesses, small, medium-sized businesses that are having a hard time getting people to work. And on top of that, you want to raise minimum wage. And you're also flooding the money market with even more money. Now, any one of those issues would be a difficult challenge for an entrepreneur to handle. But they're doing this all at the same time. It's like in war. You really only want to fight one front of a war at a time. And the U.S. being big enough, we have this policy of being able to win a two-front war, which is unique throughout modern history. You tend to only want to fight one front. Our small business and medium-sized businesses now have to fight a war, an economic war, on multiple fronts: minimum wage, inflation, unemployment, constricting supply of willing labor, and then, of course, state blocking opportunities for work due to licensing requirements. And as a result of that, you have people that are in Texas and Iowa that are freezing their butts off at night. And then the government's going to say, oh, well, we're going to come in and save the day and give you a blanket? Are you kidding me? They're the ones that are creating the problem in the first place. If we had government just leave everyone alone and actually, and I think that you probably would be on board with this too, if we funded the individual and defunded government in general, and this is part of my End the Fed, Go Green Instead plan, we're able to not only balance the budget, but make every American a millionaire somewhere between age 40 and 65, depending on the rate of return, and make every American a potential homeowner by age 18. Every American would have $80,000 in their accounts by age 18 by giving them a citizen dividend, and you'd be able to consolidate and eliminate almost at least 50%, if not 75% of government. But of course, we don't do that. Why? Because the government has no interest in actually serving the people. They have only interest in preserving their own power.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and while I don't agree entirely with the plan, that is there are some facets of that that are, you know, what I'm bringing to my Texas plan. So for example, I have rent-free Texas, which is really, you know, getting people out of the mentality of being renters and getting them into being homeowners. And a lot of this, you know, like you said, like it's government policy. It's the taxes that, you know, your income tax makes it harder for you to save money so you can buy a house. Your property tax makes it so that you're spending more of your money on rent. Property tax increases your rent, and rent is just throwing money away until you're able to buy something. The FHA, the way that they have these loans, oh, the FHA is so wonderful. It makes it easier for me to buy a house. No, it makes it easier for you to get into 30 years of debt. And then, of course, finally, which we don't have an inheritance tax in Texas, but for states that do have it, or, you know, for federal government that has some degrees of that, inheritance tax that's how you get consolidation of land that's been in families for generations. And like I talk about, because everyone's like, you know, oh, well, that's only for rich people. No, I mean, we have this I hear so many people, you know, saying, oh, you know, the poor African Americans who are descendants of slaves, who, you know, should have been given 40 acres and a mule 100 years ago. Well, those 40 acres between property taxes and inheritance taxes would be completely gone by now. And the mule, that's just a slap in the face, because mules can't be bred. So as soon as the mule dies, you've got nothing left. You can't even go to your neighbor and say, hey, let's get our mules together. Somebody might try that and find out, they must have given me a sterile mule. No, all of them are sterile. That is a fucking kick in the teeth. And and I'm sure whoever came up with this 40 acres and a mule thing was probably sitting there laughing like, oh, these guys think they're going to get something useful out of this deal. It's nonsense. And this is what they're doing. And they're taking all of the land from us. They're consolidating it. They're trying to get us to buy these little factory homes and these little subdivisions, and, you know, where it's all just like, oh, you're nice and a little. They don't want us to own big parcels of land. And there's so much land available in the U.S., but most of it's owned by the government. It's absolutely insane. And this is the wealth. And I think maybe, like, you know, from what you're talking about and from what I'm talking about, I think the end game is the same: to get all of this wealth out of the hands of government and into the hands of the people. I think maybe our strategies of how exactly to make that happen are a little bit different, but this is the same thing. Like, you know, when I have these conversations with socialists and Marxists and communists and all these other people, they're really the same way too. Like, you know, when we get past, like, the method that we've already decided, we can actually find a lot of common ground in saying, like, yeah, power, property, prosperity, wealth, and control has all been seized by an elite few, and we need to figure out how to get that back in the hands of the general public. And that's what I find really interesting. No matter what your political views are, most people can really agree with that, because that's the sum of all of the problems that we're facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. I mean, you're talking about how property taxes increases rent. It does, but it also prevents people from retiring. I mean, people used to be able to work and pay off a property, and you're good.
That's it. And here's the thing too. Like, people are like, oh, boo-hoo, you can't retire. Sad for you. And this is like the poor people saying this to the wealthy people, because, I mean, you got to have the wealth to retire. But the thing is, when all those people retire, they're getting out of the labor pool, which means the businesses that need to hire people to keep their factories going are getting more desperate, because nobody wants to come work for them, because they're like, screw you, I'm going to retire. So that means they're going to have to offer more money to get people into the factories, which means wages go up without forcing mandatory minimum wage laws. It's really good for everybody. And instead, we've somehow adopted this mentality of, oh, if somebody earns $30 an hour, tax them more, make them work harder, make them work longer. Don't ever let them retire, because I'm only earning $10 an hour and I can't retire on that. So make them work just as hard as me. And it's like, no, that's stupid. Let them earn their money fast. Let them get out of the labor pool, and then let that create space for you to move up. It's like when you have the corporate, climbing the corporate ladder, and like people are like, well, I can't get any higher than this until someone dies or gets fired. Let people get out of your way so that you can move up. Like when you talk about dead end jobs, if it's a dead end job because there's no spaces above you, that's one thing. But if it's a dead end job because the spaces above you are never becoming vacant, because those people are not able to retire, then, let people retire. That creates more opportunity for everybody else.
It does. And in the context of the minimum wage, if you also look at it from the perspective of, going back to that, small, medium-sized business that we were just talking about that's having to fight a multi-front economic war. If, for example, these contractors, and I'm just using construction as an example, I'm fairly confident this is happening in other sectors as well, but the corporation is dictating how much the job is going to go for, how much the customer is going to pay for it, right? That means that the larger corporation is not as responsive to market conditions on the ground, and that's going to cause places like Iowa and Texas to have slower recoveries. Whereas not only that, you are also making it more difficult now to get people, to do those jobs so that we can have a flexible market, again, because we're constricting the labor supply and everything else. So it's because of the corporate control on the top of the pricing structure, they're limiting the ability of small and medium-sized businesses to raise their prices so that they can raise wages and pay people more money. And in the context of corporate control with just insane inflation, it makes more sense for people to just take the money that they're given so that they potentially can work under the table or not at all. This has the makings of an intentional. It looks intentional to me. I mean, I just call it what it is. It looks intentional, and that's frustrating. You want to talk about a mule, right? 40 acres and a mule, and the mule being infertile. The seeds that we plant, that our farmers plant now,
they don't
reproduce. They're Terminator seeds.
Yeah.
Right. So now, even our food supply. So for the people at
creating
home,
dependency, it's making us dependent completely on them.
Absolutely making the human, not just American people, but everyone in the world, is becoming entirely dependent on the centralized system. If you haven't seen Soylent Green, it was 1973. It's it's an older movie, but it's I think it's important to watch. It's staged in 2020, I believe, or 2030. I'm not sure. I think it's 2020, somewhere around there.
Now.
Right. And it talks about societal collapse in New York City, and the food system is totally collapsed. And the government has basically started harvesting people because they're all revolting in the streets.
Spoiler alert.
What's that? Literally. They're literally picking people up off the streets, and then they're killing them and turning them into food, something called Soylent Green, to feed the people. And
they made, I remember there was something about like they made death like some glorified thing so that people would like volunteer to go die or something like that.
I'd have to rewatch. I don't remember that part.
It was like this, or maybe it was just like he was old and he was, I don't know, but like they went to this corporate thing and they put him in this chair and like he was watching.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah.
The scenes of like open fields and everything, and like he would die in the chair, and like I don't remember what the basis for the like why they would, like they were old and ready to die anyway, and that was just like, oh, that's the way to go. Which I mean, hey, if that's the time to go, then I mean, I guess. But I mean,
Sure.
why not go out into an actual field and enjoy life?
Well, that's the thing, is that life had gotten so bad in Soylent Green that people were opting for death when times were simpler. And they were also doing their service to humanity by feeding their brothers and sisters.
There you
And
go.
that's all possible. That's only happened because of the corporate government control. And I don't want to see that happen. But everything that is happening in America and around the world with these centralized systems point towards that type of an outcome. I mean, why else would you get rid of seeds that self-produce? I mean, you're making farmers dependent upon a corporation to provide us with food, and the food is making us fat and sick. So, do we really want to trust the so-called experts and the scientists? Right. I don't trust them farther than I can throw them.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, we're almost 2 hours into the show.
Wow.
So, yeah, no, this has been an awesome show, though. Great talk. I want to give you an opportunity. Floor is yours if you want to tell people where they can find out more about you, track you down, read some of your articles, anything. Go ahead and tell us where to find all your stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. So I wrote a book in 2019. It was called Hijacking America, Liberty Strikes Back. For the 2020 campaign, unfortunately, it was obstructed by the publisher and is still pending release. But I do have what I like to call the error edition, like a baseball card, available for sale on my website, libertystrikesback.com. There are some edits that will be made to that. I went through a round after probably 15 rounds. Every time I did another edit, they put new errors into the book. So I eventually just had to call their bluff and say, okay, I'm going to publish an error edition. And I had to find another publisher to do it in order to get the original publisher to actually start publishing. But so anyway, That's at libertystrikesback.com. The book is Hijacking America. You can also do a search on Amazon. Make sure you do the long tail search, Hijacking America, Liberty Strikes Back, and you'll find it. Also at libertystrikesback.com is my End the Fed PDF. If you want a step-by-step plan to replace the Federal Reserve Bank with a credit union that is clean, green, citizen-owned, and fully transparent, so that we can get off of oil and out of oil wars, so that we can end the war on drugs and restore power to the people, and then also to give the American people a citizen dividend so that we own our money and we can make our own rules. That's where you're going to find that plan. You'll also learn a lot about the Federal Reserve and how the Federal Reserve makes money and why pretty much everything they say is a lie, and how they're able to gain total control over America. Both of those you can find at libertystrikesback.com. My Twitter feed is Vote Joe McHugh. And my Medium article, if you want to read about Bitcoin, is medium.com/@VoteJoeMcHugh. And that is all. Dan, you are awesome. I thank you so much for having me on the show. I love our talks. I'm so glad to be able to call you a friend. And also just a shout out to, if anyone wants me to run money for them, send me an email, joe@votejoemchugh.com. I'm only sharing that one because it's the easiest for you to remember. But I'd be happy to run an email, run a little bit of money for you. I charge 30% of profits, and that's it. I don't charge an asset management fee. I don't charge a monthly fee. If we make money, then I get a portion of the profits, and that's the way it works. I can only take 15 clients, so I've got a handful of spots left. But beyond that, I'd have to actually register as an investment advisor. So that's it. Dan, let's talk again real soon. I want to talk more about your plan for taxes, and whether or not it would make sense for the Libertarian Party to invest. And the Mises Caucus is going to talk tomorrow, soliciting ideas. I would like to see them invest some of their money into launching a Liberty dollar, or a cryptocurrency specifically backed by nature, so that individual states and individuals that believe in liberty can collectively and individually secede from the U.S. dollar system and get onto a cryptocurrency. And as you said, offer discounts for products and services paid in in our Liberty currency. So let's talk a little bit more about
Awesome.
that. If you know anybody at Mises, that would be good to see what they have to say about that. Spend the money, or invest it, don't spend it, right?
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. This has been an awesome episode. I know we went a lot longer than normal, but hopefully we kept your attention all the way through. I think this was some great stuff. If you like what you heard, or even if you didn't, make sure to like and share, and subscribe and follow. And don't forget to help us out by heading over to taxationistheft.info. And we've got some really cool stuff over there. We just added some mouse pads that say Taxation Theft. They're pretty awesome. And we have the new keychains up there too, which oh, here, I got one of them right here. Which is like they're like solid metal, like
nice,
really, really nice keychains.
You need to get that Taxation is Theft on ledgers, cryptocurrency keys.
Like a coin, not a coin. What do they call it? A token?
Well, no, put that like the actual ledger, like, or the actual crypto key, like the
hardware keys?
Yes.
Ah.
You should put Taxation is Theft on those and sell them.
Ooh. All right. Don't anybody take that idea. We're going to do that next week. All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. And I will catch you next time. Taxation is Theft.
Thanks, Dan.